going to continue our little trip up the Needles Highway and the Iron Mountain Highway. In fact, we're hopefully going to finish it in this trip because we're going to wrap up my short series on good books. I think I'll circle back to it at some point, but I'm just about done. I want to just point out that we're going to see something called pigtails on this road, which if you look at them from the air, that's where the road does a full circle. So it includes a tunnel and a bridge. And the whole point behind that is to increase elevation quickly. The interesting thing about these pigtails is that they were all designed so that coming from the direction that I did, the tunnel ends with a view of Mount Rushmore. So, the dash cam isn't really that amazing of a camera. I kind of wish I could use something like a GoPro or whatever for this, but they don't record hours and hours of video like the dash cam does, so we're just going to live with it. So, back on topic. As I've talked about good books, I've hit a lot of areas. A good book is actually a very personal thing. Sometimes we love a book for entirely irrational reasons. Or they might be rational reasons, but very personal. And so there's a lot to a good book. And just because I don't think it's a good book doesn't mean it's not a good book. It just means it's not my kind of book. Two books on my shelf, which I haven't read yet, are about reading books like an English professor. So, maybe I should have read them before I filmed this series, but there it is. One thing I just wanted to avoid was, I just like that book. Sometimes you do. You can't explain why, but it's just like, I like that. That was good. Can't explain why. The characters were awful. The dialogue was awful. The description was awful. Everything was awful, and yet somehow you just loved it. So, we always have reasons to like something, whether we understand what they are or not. So why did we like it? Now, I will admit I'm a physics guy. I went to college to be a physics teacher. I teach physics at the high school level, but, hey. So I read science fiction. And we realize that what we read is fiction. Some fiction pulls us into a new universe. And I'm sorry, whether you read science fiction or not, they're all a universe. Whether it's like our own or not, it is an imaginary universe. So my use of the word universe is universal, not just science fiction. But anyway, any fiction pulls us into a new universe, and then some doesn't. Right now, I have been starting Becky Chambers' The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. Will I love it? I don't know. Whoops! The microphone just collapsed on me. Sorry. Oh, that was awkward. So I'll have to edit that out. So in the previous video, I discussed something called the mice quotient, and an English teacher, viewer of the channel, did question that because he said, there's a lot missing there, and if you're evaluating good books, yeah. And then he said it was probably simplified for science fiction, which, let's not go there. I guess I look at the mice quotient as something for classifying books. I originally wasn't going to do that last video about the mice quotient, and then as I started writing my outline, I'm like, this is the way I want to go. Mice quotient is milieu, idea, character, and events. It's just a way of saying what kind of book is it. It's not so much what makes it a good book, it's the kind of book. And in hindsight, it probably didn't belong in my good books series, but I just remember way back I did a video on Lois Lenski's Prairie School, and I mentioned the mice quotient. I said, I'm going to come back to this, and then I never did. So I did a whole video on it. But anyway, books, again, are very personal. Why do we like this one? Not this one. To me, personal again, to me a big one is the universe. Is it larger than the story? I have to feel like oh boy, I am just scratching the surface of this universe that the author has created. Or is this pretty much it? That will suck me in. It's kind of it's an amazing feeling to finish a book or series of books and feel like I've just scratched the surface. Especially if there was so much there in those books. I love a universe that's larger than just the original tale. Intentional or not, J.R.R. Tolkien did this. He started with languages, because he was a linguist, and he created a whole universe. Or the novel Dune. It was so huge that the novel created 6 novels before he passed away. I even think about something like Nikolai Gogol's Dead Souls. There's so much content there, and I wish the author had lived because I was kind of curious, where is he headed with this? I'll never know because he died before he finished it. There's just so many fictional universes. So yeah, Orson Scott Card's Mice Quotient provides a beginning, and I think it's a good beginning. Because it helps us classify a story. And, I am aware of the controversy of Orson Scott Card, and I don't want to go there right now. But what else is going to suck us into a story? Does it all make sense? Maybe we're crazy. Have you ever been distracted by the universe that a novel creates? Some authors create amazing description. You are just pulled into the universe because it feels so real. You can taste the sand on your tongue. You can smell the acrid air. You can, feel the burning heat or whatever. And I'm not talking about purple prose. That's the overly flowery description. You're just like, oh, get on with it. Don't care. J.R.R. Tolkien described such a universe. Now, again, he had a focus on language because that was his interest, which is interesting. You don't see that a lot in fiction. But he understood the rest. And his descriptions definitely pull us in. How many other novels pull us in through the vivid universe they create? Again, I am not talking purple prose because that's just annoying. And it may not be the descriptions. It may just be the way they write. Some writers are just really clever. They just, the way they express a story, you're just like, 3 hours just passed. Some authors are going to pull you. So yeah, some of them pull you in by their writing. I sometimes joke about a clever turn of phrase, but it can be attractive. I do not read William Shakespeare for fun, but he wrote what was really common entertainment for his day. He wasn't writing highbrow stuff. I find him hard to read, but then he turns around and uses words very well. And, if you've read Romeo and Juliet or read it in school, hopefully you had a English teacher who was willing to point out all the jokes in there, and including all of the dirty jokes. Yeah! Romeo and Juliet is a filthy piece of work. We don't have the book banners coming for it yet. And it's frequently taught to high school freshmen, just to add to the fun. I guess they're close-ish to the age of Romeo and Juliet. Or, we could talk about Lady Macbeth's guilt in Macbeth, which apparently is a work I'm not supposed to name. That's expressed very well, with her trying to wash out her guilt. Out, darned spot, and all that. See, I remember that. I didn't need a book in front of me because it was clever. And other, should I call it lowbrow entertainment? I'm thinking of like Douglas Adams' work, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, or Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, or even the episodes of Doctor Who that he wrote in the 80s. Just very clever. He talks about how, the Vogon spaceships are hovering in the air the way rocks don't. Or when you shift lazily from fourth gear down to first gear on the highway and your engine leaps out of the hood. And I'm probably quoting those wrong, but, just he clever, just unexpected, like, wait, what? Very clever turn of phrase. Mark Twain is a very good writer. He's one that can definitely turn a phrase well. Mark Twain, think of Tom Sawyer, who's honestly a little bit of an asshole. Do we put up with Tom Sawyer because the daily life of some kid in 1850s or 60s Missouri is interesting? No, Mark Twain makes him interesting. Now, some authors do a lot of research. I'm thinking of like Frederick Forsyth in The Day of the Jackal. Very meticulously researched. Some authors just know a lot and they embed us in a universe. Tom Clancy was excellent, especially in his earlier works, at embedding us in a universe, embedding us in the technical details and the research. I said Frederick Forsyth. See, I should read my outline. But, part of what draws us into Frederick Forsyth's The Day of the Jackal are the very detailed preparations of the assassin. We almost sympathize with the assassin just because of his competency. Other authors like Graham Greene or John le Carré understand the world of espionage because they lived it. John le Carré understands the utter banality of the world of most spies, and he also remembers how human they are. One thing with Graham Greene is he brings us ordinary people and all their weaknesses and then throws them into extraordinary situations. One of my early book reviews on this channel was Graham Greene's The Power and the Glory, which shares a particularly ugly period of Mexican history, where a weak, pathetic, and not so good man, actually, becomes truly sympathetic in the context of his writing. And again, so much of it is personal. I can totally see Lois Lensky's weaknesses as a writer. Prairie School, she's got a lot of things she just wants to cover and make sure she fits in there. Sometimes by telling, not showing. But what she does very well, to the point that it might be her fault I'm stuck here in North Dakota, she evokes the world of a one-room school north of McLaughlin, South Dakota in the late 1940s, early 1950s. So, yeah, Lois Lensky hit me in the feels when I had my tonsils out around age 6 to 7. I was in first grade. I'm not sure if it was before or after my birthday. So, yeah, she's been on my mind ever since. And I'm probably stuck here in southwest North Dakota thanks to her. I've been fascinated by World War I since I was very young. I remember we had to do a speech when I was a freshman in high school, so I did one where I talked about no man's land in World War I. When I had to read Barbara Tuchman's book, The Guns of August, in college, I loved it. This is a detailed study of a single month of the First World War. Basically, the first month that kind of kicked the whole deal off. Clearly even the subject matter can pull us into certain books. We might be pulled in by genre. One time in my life I read only science fiction, and to be honest, that's still my preferred genre, although I've branched out quite a bit. Long before I really paid attention to specific authors, I read a lot of Robert Heinlein, Isaac Asimov, and Arthur C. Clarke, just because of genre. And actually, I've been trying to build up a complete collection of Alfred Elton Van Vogt, A.E. Van Vogt, as you'll see on the book covers. Not the most amazing author, but he definitely has some imagination. I had to wet my whistle there. Clifford Simak is another one with very pastoral type science fiction. And when you discover an author, that really means a lot once you understand that. As a kid, I just didn't. I started Dan Simmons with the science fiction of Hyperion. I followed him through the horrors of Carrion Comfort and Song of Kali, both of which I've reviewed here. And I've read his historical and horror novel, The Terror, not yet reviewed. And I've got his maybe unclassifiable Ilium and Olympus. And I have a bunch more of his books I need to read. I'll just mention A.E. Van Vogt again. He was an interesting contemporary of Robert Heinlein, Arthur C. Clarke, and Isaac Asimov. Definitely a more pulpy writer. But if you've seen the movie Alien, his work is behind that. So yeah, I collect his books. Clifford Simak writing more pastoral stuff. He definitely, like me, has a rural focus. He's more focused in either Iowa or Wisconsin, I forget. But, rural is the important thing. So most of what you read from Clifford Simak is going to have a very rural feel. And he's a Hugo Award winner. So yeah, we follow authors. Sometimes we'll be like, okay, that's not one of their best, but I'm going to read it because, it's one of theirs. Sometimes we want to be subversive. I'm thinking about, right now, all the book bans going on in the red states. I live in one that's about to try and attack teachers again. Yeah, we can't find enough teachers, but let's attack the ones we have. Topic for another video. But, the fact that these books are being banned now makes me want to read them, where before I didn't really care. So emotional reasons just like that can work. I got to talk. One of these days I need to talk about Drake, North Dakota, where they had a nice little book burning back in the 1970s. I'm hoping to visit Drake and walk around the town and talk about it. But what a story. That went way out of hand for them. They thought, we'll just quietly burn these books that the English teacher, this liberal English teacher, is making our kids read, and whoopsie. But anyway, so emotional reasons can get you to read a book. Overall, I just like to read a lot of books. And yeah, only some of them stay with me, fiction or nonfiction. It just has to be larger than the book. Will I reference it again? Is this just I'm not going to get anything more if I read this a second time. Dan Simmons' Hyperion Cantos leaves us wanting a lot more. And nonfiction does the same thing. I actually have a book from a TV show called MasterChef. The book is called MasterChef Kitchen Bible. I'm looking at it right now. That actually inspires me to want to improve my cooking, and I've gotten some techniques out of it. And I have improved a lot. I've made my own gnocchi now, and I'm made my own ravioli. One of my goals for this winter when it cools off again is I want to make, what's it called? Ravioli l'uovo. That's really bad Italian, but, it's ravioli with a egg in it that the yolk stays yolky, not hard. So, yeah, I'm never going to be a gourmet chef, but it's kind of fun to try out new kinds of cooking. So that book has stayed with me and inspired me. I have another cooking book called Kitchen Companion by, I can't read it, Polly something that starts with a C. Anyway, just a lot of why do you include milk in bread, all the logic behind recipes rather than recipes themselves. Very useful. But I suppose the thing is, overall, why wouldn't you read? The wisdom of humanity is just packed into such a convenient, portable format. Heck, now you can put it on your Kindle or your iPad or your cell phone if you like reading off a screen. It's just sad that there are so many people who just ignore this amazing opportunity. You know, it's not an accident that the most successful people in the world set time aside to read. And yeah, there's several types of reading. There's reading for entertainment. There's reading to improve yourself. But I have to say, even if you're just reading fiction, you're building up more than you would just sitting by passively. Even if it's trashy romance novels, it's adding something to you. It's adding value. It's adding empathy. It's adding understanding of different people, maybe different places. So, read. Also, if you want to get ahead in your field, read. I have more than several books on my shelf in the field of education. How do I know how to improve my teaching if I don't read? And again, that's why all the top people in their fields read. And if you live in a red state that's banning books, read the books that your government has banned. Make them available to your kids. These are states that are deciding, yeah, we're not just going to say, this kid can't read it because his parents don't approve. We're just going to say for everybody, you can't read this book. Because that's how freedom and small government work. These states are limiting everyone, rather than just the people who want to limit themselves and their kids. So free yourself and read. And especially read a banned book. Talk to you later. And my dedicated fans notice that the video lasts a bit longer. So I wanted to use up the footage, and rather than make a new video, I just decided to continue. So yeah, this is the rest of the video and the footage. So I'm going to use up this footage, and I thought, since I'm doing a series on good books, maybe it'd be good if I conclude with a few books that I actually like. So I'm going to open with Sarah Suzanka's The Not So Big House. I first heard of her on the Charlie Rose show. It was shown on PBS back before we knew a little more history and reality of who Charlie Rose was, which was really disappointing and disgusting. I put a link to the interview anyway. So I was actually at one point in my life considering a career in residential architecture. Large part thanks to Sarah Suzanka. I'm still fascinated by it. Now, I'll just point out that I am no minimalist. I will never live in a van or a tiny house. I do enjoy videos about living in vans and tiny houses, but I'm not going to do it. I'm more what they call a smallist. I'm happier with a smaller, better used space, better made space. And Sarah Suzanka expressed this beautifully. She talked about using an architect to, instead of having square footage, get more out of less square footage. I'll be fair. I kind of felt that her later books just did not capture this nearly as well. And by then, I think she was more writing a trend, living off her name. But her first book was quite good, and it's a wonderful mix of architectural photography and just a prose explanation of her philosophy. It's a good one. Graham Greene's The Power and the Glory exposed me to a part of Mexican history in a way that my education entirely missed. Surprise! I had no idea of the role of religion in the history of Mexico, and I especially knew nothing about the history of Mexico in general. I distinctly remember learning about Benito Juarez in history class, but that's pretty much it for the history of Mexico. I mean, we didn't really talk about what Pancho Villa was up to. We didn't talk about how, a couple of these states were actually part of Mexico, and we kind of grabbed them. We got a very sanitized version of how Texas became part of the United States rather than part of Mexico. We kind of missed a lot. And Mexico is, the neighbor to the south. So it's kind of sad when I look back on it and realize how much is missing of that history in my education. And I hope that it's better now. I can't honestly speak for even the school where I teach now, because I don't teach history. But beyond that history, this is actually, The Power and the Glory, was a book that made me sympathetic to some actually kind of unsympathetic characters. The whiskey priest and the lieutenant. Both of them are, I think, fundamentally good people, in their way. But both... Whoops! Microphone attacked me again. Alright, got everything reset here. But anyways, but both of them suffer from some... Try that again. Both of them suffer from some very human weaknesses. Again, different weaknesses, but they suffer from them. The whiskey priest is more weaknesses of the flesh, but the lieutenant is, he's very devout and very devoted to his cause. But that's almost a weakness too, where he abandons anything human. We'll jump back into nonfiction here. Mark Reisner's Cadillac Desert. I put off reading that book for way too long. And when I did finally read it, it really altered how I view places to live. It brought up something I had never in my life considered. There was a time when I would never have thought about the natural availability of water. Just wouldn't have been a thing. Now that I have read his book, it's going to forever be part of my calculations when I go to live somewhere. And it definitely gave me a new appreciation of my dry southwestern North Dakota home, because we might be dry, but we have water. I mean, water enough for the population we have. If the population explodes here, we're going to be out of luck, but hey, that's a reason to keep the population small here. So back when I was in college, the cover of Dan Simmons' book, Hyperion, pulled me in. I hated that book so much. Hated it so much that I bought the sequel. Yeah, that doesn't make sense, but, I just like, okay, I hate this, but I gotta know what's going on, so I bought the sequel. But in rereading the thing as an adult, and more, I see what the book was doing. And now I've read all 4 books in the series. What the book does is it drops you into a far future universe. We get to watch a group of people make a pilgrimage to the time tombs on the planet Hyperion under the threat of the Shrike. And you just better figure it all out. Because the book just plops you in it. And I think that's part of what bothered me when I was in college. Each pilgrim tells their own story. And the reality is that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I have actually reviewed these books, so check that out. But, I think what I was struck by was just what a unique universe it was. Very unique technology. We got to see humanity at its worst and its best. And in the end, the series concludes with a new vision for humanity. And it really ties a lot of different, disparate topics and features together. So we're about to go through a tunnel, maybe after all these cars finally let me go through. A lot of the tunnels are one way, and with a one-way tunnel, you're kind of supposed to take turns, but people do not. Oh, except for this person, apparently. So let's see if we see Mount Rushmore. Not yet. Okay, yes, we do, but you can't tell because we're so far away in the dash cam with the short focal length. You can't really tell, but that's Mount Rushmore up there in that cut through the trees. All right, back to the topic. I have not yet reviewed Frank Herbert's Dune, but I did discuss the movie. I almost feel like it was around this time last year I did that. I don't know, but I'll put the link in here somehow. Mama Squirrel is actually the one who turned me on to the book. It is far deeper than it first appears. At its surface, you've got rich boy and his rich family go take over a new fiefdom, and some other rich family kicks them out and oppresses them, and then rich boy enlists the local natives to retake his rightful heritage. Yay. But the book is a lot deeper than that. Paul seems like he's the hero. I just called him Rich Boy, but he seems like the hero, but he actually isn't. And he knows he isn't. He actually is, deep down inside, he's afraid of becoming the leader of something evil. The sequel, Dune Messiah, shows him after he's become the leader of something evil, where he's led a jihad and gone on the attack all across the empire, the galaxy, or whatever. And further sequels just delve into that in more depth. Frank Herbert's son, Brian Herbert, and the author Kevin J. Anderson further expanded this universe with dubious results, but they wrote a lot of books. Yay. They're readable, but they're the kind of thing that you're like, okay, read that, never going to bother again. It just doesn't have the depth or interest or the just beautiful turn of phrase of Frank Herbert's books. Another one to bring up, I've mentioned my interest in the First World War. John Buchan wrote spy fiction, like the book The 39 Steps, those set around this war. We meet kind of, sort of, semi everyman Richard Hannay. He is confronted with a worldwide plot. Ends up with a submarine and a bunch of junk, but there have been 2 movies made out of that book, so, I'm making it sound kind of silly, but there was a lot there. But I think my biggest surprise in the whole series was his book, Courts of the Morning. It's set in South America, and at first it seems just like another merry adventure for our white heroes. But then the white heroes pull back as they realize that their adventure is actually playing with people's lives and their fates and their countries. Okay, not perfect, but it definitely brings up the problem with too much adventure fiction written in that day. And I am pleased that John Buchan at least he acknowledged it. My mathematical nature was kind of tickled by Edward R. Tufte's The Visual Display of Quantitative Information, which was a whole book about how to display numbers and the data you get from numbers. It is full of illustrations of graphs, of visual things like maps, of a number of different ways of displaying data. And it really opened my eyes to what an amazing field that is. I have the opportunity to teach statistics this year, and part of me is thinking, what could I do with that? One of his great ones, he talks about there's an amazing graph of the Napoleonic Wars where Napoleon marched his army into Russia and then came back. And you're just like, oh, because this graph has the size of the army represented as a bar as they go across Europe and back. And you're like, yeah, that got a lot smaller. There's one about cosmonauts in orbit. There are just so many different pieces of data, and here's the guy's name. He's Charles Joseph Menard. Was a French gentleman, but anyway, just an incredible graph that just shows what Russia did to Napoleon's army. If you go through the book, it's an amazing piece of work. And it really shows that display of data isn't just a soulless mathematical thing. It is art. And the display of data can be beautiful art. And that's what I think Edward Tufte is. He's an artist who recognizes the art that is present in data. Data tell a story. And in this case, they tell a beautiful story in so many cases. So I really appreciate that. Some other books I'm thinking of. I had to wander into my bedroom to look, but I've got a lot of good fiction there. I'm thinking of, I mentioned A.E. Van Vogt earlier in this. I mentioned I'm collecting his books. So why did I start collecting his books? One of them was The World of A. Well, I should say The World of Null A. The title has an A with a bar over it. And it's supposedly a book about logic and all that. And you read the book and you read about somebody jumping on the running boards of a car, and you're like, yeah, I don't have a running board on my Toyota Camry. I guess I do see running boards on pickups and such, SUVs, but in the 1940s, I guess you didn't have those, but it's if you can set that aside, cool double tunnel, which doesn't open on Mount Rushmore. But anyway, if you can set all that aside, it really puts you in an alien situation, an alien world. And Gilbert Gosain, which I don't know if the name Gosain was intentional or not, but he is exploring a new universe, and he himself is kind of lost, like, what the hell is going on here? And kind of like Hyperion, you just delve into it, and You find out that there are multiple Gilbert Gosains. Just a lot of really in-depth science fiction-y ideas. In the 1940s, A.E. Van Vogt just kind of casually introduced all these ideas. Very cool. Asked me to summarize what the hell the book's about. I can't do it, but wow, does it appeal to my imagination. And there are 2 sequels. One, the final sequel is very hard to find. But that book is what really got me onto that author. And I read a lot of his books. I'm like, what the hell is happening? And yet they drag you in. He's really good at that whole alien world thing. You really honestly feel like you are in an alien world when you read his work. So, again, another good author. Clifford Simak, who I mentioned in what was supposed to be the original video, wrote a book called Way Station, which won a Hugo. Way Station is about a Civil War veteran who returns home to have basically nothing except his old farmstead left. And he is approached by an alien to say, hey, you want to run a station on our transporter network? And that's what he does. He becomes immortal on the way. But he is put in charge of a station on a transporter network where they transport people kind of like the Star Trek transporters from planet to planet, and he gets to meet aliens of all kinds. And then he gets involved in a little intergalactic plot, but I just thought the whole notion of this Civil War veteran running a futuristic transporter network was kind of cool. Oh, yeah, and we're on another tunnel, which this one will, again, open on Mount Rushmore, but the flippin' dash cam just doesn't have the focal length for you to see it. So, yeah, I got to enjoy it. You don't. So, sorry. The dash cam just flattens all the landscapes I visit. And I'm holding back because I could see a car was waiting, so I'm being a good citizen, letting them get through. But anyway, Civil War veteran, and one of the things I've always thought is, I've had this idea in the back of my mind of writing a book about a World War I soldier who gets sucked into the far future. And one of the things I thought was, he's going to be kind of insufferable and kind of a bigot, just because of the ideas of his time. What's he going to do with a homosexual couple or an interracial couple? He's going to be like, yipe! And not because he's a bad person, just because he's a product of his time. And yeah, Mount Rushmore right there. And we got to talk about Mount Rushmore in a video one of these days, because that's kind of an awful, awful, awful story. But not today. We're just going to enjoy the idea of good books. And good books are so powerful. I'm going to come back to Dan Simmons again. Dan Simmons wrote a book called The Terror. The Terror is about an expedition to the Arctic. 2 ships. One of them was the Terror. The other one was the Erebus. And they got locked in the Arctic ice as they searched for the Northwest Passage, which was, this mythical idea that, there's a passage through here that's going to lead from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean through the Arctic. Never mind that it all freezes up in the winter, but now they were doggone sure it had to be there. So the 2 ships freeze up. And by the way, true story, because that's what really happened to these 2 ships. We're just not 100% sure what happened after. We have found the wreckage of the 2 ships, but the story of their last days, kind of missing. And so what Dan Simmons did is he fictionalized it and figured out a story. Dan Simmons' work was eventually turned into a mini-series. Oh yeah, that was one of those pigtails. Anyway, Dan Simmons' work was eventually turned into a mini-series And if you read the book, I'm a little disturbed by the fact that he had to bring in, Demon Bear or whatever the hell it was. But on the whole, he wrote an excellent novel about desperate men in a desperate time trying to survive in the Arctic after their ships are locked in the ice. When in the summers their ships cannot melt free, and what the hell do? You cannot radio for help. Nobody's coming in with a helicopter to help you. You are completely on your own. That's what Dan Simmons' The Terror was. Yeah, again, Demon Bear and whatever else is going on, but that was the essence of the story. And oh yeah, people going mad from lead poisoning because the solder on their canned food was no good. Scary. And probably explains Demon Bear. I have not reviewed that book because I haven't felt ready to, but a very powerful book. And one of these days I'm going to get around to reviewing it, and watch out when I do so. So that was just a voyage through a few of my favorite books. We've barely scratched the surface of books that I enjoy. I'm going to close up here with my theme music for my on-the-road videos, but I'm going to continue my book reviews because I've really enjoyed doing it, and I have so many books I want to share. My biggest problem is just getting the time to set aside to write up a review on these books, because when I review most of the books I read, I just want to do them justice. I want to give them what they deserve. And that involves preparation. So, yeah, look forward to a lot more. So I want to thank you for watching. And this really is goodbye. So, bye-bye.